7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Humans are now hackable animals.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
I think it's fair to say that in the past few years, our world has experienced a collective trauma. The constant fear, the repeated lockdowns, the economic strain, the social stigmatization, the censorship, and the paradoxical messages have left wounds in our collective consciousness that we are only beginning to understand. In this video, I will read an illuminating essay by Ariane Bilheran, PhD, a French psychologist and philosopher. The author of more than 25 books, Dr. Bilheran's areas of expertise include diseases of civilization, harassment, manipulation, power deviance, totalitarianism, and reclaiming personal power. In this essay, she explores the role of trauma experienced in the context of the rise of totalitarianism and two of trauma's most powerful psychological mechanisms, dissociation and denial. She then offers gentle suggestions for how we can support someone we believe is in denial to safely come out of denial. I have edited her essay slightly for clarity and share it here with her generous permission. Traumatic dissociation is a powerful psychological mechanism that occurs when an individual experiences terror at a perceived or real threat to their integrity or that of others. In traumatic dissociation, the individual psyche is stunned, blocked, and unable to think about what is happening to them. It is like an open wound on which the psyche tries to put band-aids called defense mechanisms, one of which, and not the least, is denial. Denial is the inability to represent a reality that is experienced as unbearable. For example, for what concerns us, the representation that certain people in power would knowingly want to harm us. This representation can create such a level of fear that the individual has no choice but to remove it from his or her field of possibilities. It does not exist. It cannot exist. The process is completely unconscious to the individual. It happens in spite of them. Totalitarianism should not be confused with dictatorship or tyranny. Totalitarianism is a collective mental drift, a madness that gives the appearance of reason and argument. For a totalitarian drift to occur, there must be a coalition between the masses and the regime's ideology. To achieve such a coalition, the totalitarian regime stages three major traumatic fears: the fear of death, the fear of losing everything, and the fear of separation. And it proposes an ideology, an illusory belief in which the individual can believe himself safe from death, loss, and separation as long as he is quote-unquote good and obedient. The traumatic denial, having allowed the stupefaction of critical thinking, the individual is as if dispossessed of himself and functions like an automaton. The totalitarian system then occupies the psychic life of its citizens by its delirious narrative, a discourse of certainty that has an answer to everything. Big Brother thinks for you and takes care of you. Don't think and everything will be fine. Some call this phenomenon mass hypnosis. Hypnosis is a state of consciousness characterized by focused attention, reduced peripheral awareness, and greatly increased suggestibility. According to Gustave Le Bon, author of The Crowd, a book that inspired totalitarian leaders such as Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, and Mao, a crowd naturally exerts a degree of hypnotic influence on its individuals, making them less conscious and more susceptible to intellectual, emotional, and behavioral contagion. To potentialize this naturally occurring mass hypnosis to its advantage, a totalitarian regime induces a collective trauma. It repeats anxiety-causing and paradoxical messages to create stupor and mental anesthesia. One is victimized, so one stops feeling. One is confused, so one stops thinking for oneself, and this until one enters in the collective delirious contagion. The fanatical repetition of the aggressor's propaganda and the pursuit of his idealized defense, the famous Stockholm Syndrome. The feelings of trust or affection that in many cases of kidnapping or hostage-taking the victim feels towards the captor. The mass hypnosis is deepened, the delirious contagion has taken place, and the will of the crowd is under the sway of the totalitarian regime. This psychological torment leads to a considerable number of addictions, depressive ideas, risky behaviors, and violence against oneself and others, as the discourse of the totalitarian regime unfolds its seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statements, leading to ever greater mental confusion. The main question that should concern psychopathology studies, but unfortunately does not, is how to help someone come out of denial. I will make 3 suggestions. The first is to avoid discussing the distressing representation too frontally with someone in denial. Any frontal explanation will fail because it will reinforce the denial. We must understand that when we try to convince someone who is in denial, we are expressing our own anxiety that people will wake up to the totalitarian drift. We are transmitting an excess of anxiety to an individual who is already ravaged by fear. The second suggestion is to talk about life before the trauma. Remembering life before the trauma can help the person we believe is in denial to return to fundamental, reassuring landmarks, to reestablish emotional safety, and to reactivate their logical functions, all of which are key assets in processing what has happened to them and safely coming out of denial. The third suggestion is to maintain a caring, constructive attitude. It is important to position oneself as a caring companion, because coming out of denial can be brutal in some cases, and the risk of psychological collapse are real. Sometimes some people do not come out of denial because they are caught in the propaganda of the totalitarian regime, whose corruption of language has deprived them of the conceptual tools to think about reality. The work of deconstructing indoctrination must therefore be carried out with patience and pedagogy, recalling the origin of words, the meaning of words, and the various paradoxes used by the totalitarian regime to paralyze thought. It is also essential to help the individual construct a chronology of facts, how it all began, on what foundations, what values, what legitimacy, what truth. An edifice built on lies is bound to collapse sooner or later.